Hello there! Welcome back to Void Dwarf Studios, and today we're going to be digging into, something that has a little bit of a complicated history for me, because I started off absolutely hating this with a passion. It killed off my Bretonnians, my beloved Bretonnians, and so many other races from the old world that I used to love and enjoy. But now I actually have grown fairly fond of it, and this is helped by the fact that the old world is now returning. It is Age of Sigmar. The thing that killed my Bretonnians. So I will try and not mention them too often during this video. But yes, that ended the Warhammer Fantasy world and started the Age of Sigmar, the high fantasy genre that GW now use. And whilst in the beginning it was on some fairly shaky ground, the lore has progressed quite considerably since its inception, and I actually rather enjoy it. It's not quite as well fleshed out as Warhammer Fantasy ever was, but it's getting there, and the story so far it's interesting, it's enjoyable, and I think I have a good enough grasp of it to be able to tell you about it properly. So this is going to be an overview. I'm going to do it the other way around this time. Tell me if you prefer it this way around, where I tell you the general history of the Age of Sigmar story from beginning to the current times, or as current as I can get it, and just see if you see how this goes. So, to tell the story of Age of Sigmar, you kinda have to start at the tail end of Warhammer Fantasy. I won't go into too many details about the end times, as I've said previously. I believe they deserve a video in their own right, because there are things that are both good and crap about the end times series. Anyway, long story short, Karl Franz, the emperor of the Empire, one of the humans' largest civilization in the old world, had a final battle with Archaon, the ever-chosen champion of chaos. In this conflict, the old world basically blows up around them. Like, the entire planet is scorched with fire and chaos magic, and darkness consumes everything. Everything goes black. And now we cut to Age of Sigmar, where Karl Franz, who had been possessed by the spirit of Sigmar, the god that the humans of the Empire worshipped, is floating in space. Don't ask me how he can breathe in space. He's a god at this point, so he can do what he likes. But he was wounded, and he wasn't in a good way. And probably would have been in serious trouble if the Chaos Gods bumped into him, but instead he bumped into a being called Dracothian, a galaxy-sized dragon who decided that this was an interesting-looking bauble shining in space, and helped heal him. And Dracothian essentially showed Sigmar that there were other realms, like, I want to say, floating asteroids with land masses on them, essentially. It hasn't really been explained how they got there. They could be fragments of the old world, although that seems unlikely. They could just be asteroids that have somehow gained their own kind of magical fields, which means they could support life. We're not entirely sure. Much like in Warhammer Fantasy, each one of these realms seemed to align itself with a particular type of magic, and depending on what type of magic, basically dictated what kind of environment you were living in. For example, the realm of Akshi, the realm of Akshi. I'm so terrible at pronouncing these names. The realm of fire. I'm going to call it the realm of fire. Essentially is, well, everything is in one way or another on fire, or it needs to be tough enough to survive in this realm. There's a lot of volcanic activity. It's got like iron trees to survive the heat, and it's a very harsh place to live. But the people who live in the realm of fire, dwarves and humans for the most part, have many aspects of fire, like hot tempers, fiery passions, they relate to it in some way. If you're in the realm of life, then you're surrounded by trees everywhere you go. Everything is sprawling with life. It's overflowing with the power of life. If you go to the realm of death, then, well, Everything in some way or another is ending, is dead or dying. It's a place of ends, not beginnings. Sigmar took up refuge in the realm of heaven, where he built his own city, which he called Azurheim. Got some very Nordic names going on in these different realms. Around the core of the world that was, around what was Warhammer Fantasy. He didn't really know what to do with it at that point. He just decided that it was a place to build the city. And not only that, but many of the beings from the old world had survived. Those who had become avatars of the various winds of magic. I know I will explain this better in a end times video, but bear with me. They essentially had survived in one way or another, and Sigmar, with the help of Dracothian, explored the various realms and revived many of the avatars from the age that was. You've got Alariel, who became the goddess of life. You've got Grimnir, who is the god of war and fire for the dwarves. And you had Grungi, the god of smithing, his brother. You have the orc gods Gork and Mork, who, yeah, they didn't get harmed in the end times. The greenskins got mostly wiped out. But, greenskins. They can survive virtually everything, it seems. At this point in time, Gork and Mork had fused into one being, which was called Gorka Morka, and Sigmar found him trapped, and upon freeing him, they had a massive fist fight, because Gorka Morka, he loves a fight, and enjoyed this fist fight so much that they became friends of, well, as much as an orc god could ever have friends. You had the gods of light, the twins Tyrion and Teclis. You had the god of shadows, Malarion, and Morathi somehow managed to survive. Not a god, but she got vomited out of Slaanesh, so that was neat. So she's around. You also had the lizard men who, in their floating pyramid spaceships that managed to blast off from the old world, had managed to remain relatively safe. And though they had no longer the guidance of their Old One tablets, because, well, they were put on the Old World to stop chaos from winning, they decided to wreak their vengeance whenever they found chaos, or anything with any kind of chaotic nature. The Skaven also managed to survive. I don't know. I honestly don't know how the Skaven survived. I'm going to assume that the Skaven god, the Great Horn Rat, somehow managed to protect and or gather up his followers. And Nagash, the self-made god of death. Yep, Nagash managed to survive. Well, Sigmar revived him. It doesn't really explain how, just that Sigmar kinda accidentally revived him. But in the beginning, in one way or another, all these gods were working in cohesion. They formed a pantheon, each one of these gods taking one of the realms to be their home, their chosen place. And they basically ran the mortal realms. For a very long time, things were okay. Like, civilizations popped up again, like humans. Again, don't ask me how. There were some humans on these little rocks. Unfortunately, because of the nature of the lore for Age of Sigmar, there is a lot that's yet to be fully fleshed out. In many cases, it's assumed that the gods in one way or another were able to recreate the races that were on the fantasy world. Except for elves, who had been mostly eaten by Slaanesh. There were a few that managed to survive, but the majority of them had been eaten. The elven souls that used to live in Athel Loren, the domain of the Wood Elves, Alariel was able to merge with the trees in the realm of life. These became known as the Sylvaneth. Trees fused with the souls of elves from the world that was. Some of them can even remember vague snippets of their previous lives. In fact, in order to revive the other elven races, it took Tyrion, Teclis and Morathi working together to find Slaanesh, who had gorged on so many elf souls that it was fat and unable to move, and was hiding, trying to digest them all, to entrap it and lock it away in a prison between the realms of shadow and light. It doesn't particularly explain how they extracted the souls. I personally have this mental image that Tyrion, Teclis and Morathi took it in turns to boot Slaanesh in the gut until souls came out. But that is how the races of the Illumineth, the Deepkin, and Witch Elves came into being, with Teclis originally creating the Deepkin, but deciding that was a failed project, and feeling that their god was going to destroy them, the Deepkin fled into the ocean, the Witch Elves being created by Morathi, as well as the Light Elves being created by Tyrion and Teclis. Now is probably as good as any time to mention that with Slaanesh currently out of commission and missing, the Great Horn Rat, the god of the Skaven, became one of the 4 great Chaos gods. Despite this though, for a while things were okay. The Chaos gods, however, never let anything lie, so as soon as they realised that this pantheon of gods were alive, they decided that they wanted to enter into the mortal realms, as destroying the old world was fun and all, but it meant an end to the game, and they wanted to start a new game. But because Sigmar had organised the other gods into a pantheon where they all worked together, this made it almost impossible for the Chaos gods to gain a foothold, as the pantheon united was stronger than the Chaos gods. Or so it seemed. As the Chaos gods could not enter the mortal realms without assistance, they needed something on the other side to help pull them through. The Chaos gods needed to find a chink in the Pantheon's armour, and there was a chink alright. Even at this point the Pantheon was starting to fracture, as the various differences between the gods started becoming more and more apparent, but they were still keeping together, understanding that it was in their best interests, until Nagash decided in his great wisdom that he could screw over everyone and become the sole god of the mortal realms himself. His plan was relatively simple. He was going to essentially let Chaos win. It's off to a great start, Nagash. He was going to let Chaos win, defeat all the other gods, and then, as he was the god of death, he would revive all the undead that Chaos had wiped out, and then just swarm Chaos with bodies. And he chose his time to make this betrayal during a Chaos incursion into the mortal realms, where Sigmar was attempting to stop it. Unfortunately for Nagash, Sigmar was royally pissed at his betrayal, and decided, instead of fighting Chaos, to go and fight him. In Sigmar's rage, he led an army into the realm of death to go and thoroughly stomp Nagash. So Nagash had to flee into his domain, allowing Chaos to seep into the world. Led by Archaon, who had also managed to survive the destruction of the old world, and during this time, as far as we're aware, he has been stomping around the realm of Chaos, basically beating the snot out of anything the Chaos gods tell him to do for their amusement. Although Archaon does not care to become a Chaos demon, wanting to keep his own mind. And this meant that Chaos managed to gain a foothold into the mortal realms, and once that happened, the game was sort of over at that point. Sigmar had one final battle with Archaon, where his magical hammer, Gal Maraz, was lost. He threw it at Archaon, Archaon did some magical mumbo-jumbo, and the hammer disappeared. With that, Sigmar decided that all bets were off, and he needed to get out of there fast. So, using the realm gates, the essentially portals between each of these realms, he flew back to the realm of heaven, which is his own personal domain, and then locked the gate behind him, taking as many loyal people to his cause as he could before slamming the gates, stopping anything from coming in or out. And during this period, where Sigmar was recovering and working out how best to defeat Chaos, Chaos basically took over everything. There were a couple races that could resist. There were a few realms that had essentially abilities and places to hide that meant that they could survive the Chaos incursion, but on the whole, Chaos swamped over everything, particularly the followers of Khorne, because there was so much war going on, he was having a fantastic time. Nurgle predominantly spent his time and his forces in the realm of life, trying to essentially corrupt everything he could find, and Alarielle was not able to push him back, and with the death of Coronos, the god of the hunt, who she had also managed to revive, she fled into the deepest parts of the forests. The dwarves had lost their god Grimnir earlier on in a titanic battle with a salamander called Volcatrix, the mother of all magmadroths, basically big scaly volcanic lizards that could breathe fire, which resulted in the dwarf god and Volcatrix exploding, creating a new metal, which the Fire Slayers are eager to collect in the belief that it could restore their god. This happened way back in the Age of Myth, when the gods still walked amongst their people, and Grugni had disappeared, and so many of them fled as well, to any hiding places they could. What did Nagash get out of his treachery, you may ask? Oh, he got pasted by the forces of Chaos. Archaon invaded his realm and beat several kinds of crap out of the god of death, and was only able to survive because his followers were able to gather up the bits of Nagash that were left and flee the battle. It would be a long time before Nagash came back. Tyrion and Teclis in the Realm of Light also shut their doors, preventing anything from getting in. The elves in the Realm of Shadow were mostly safe from Chaos, as despite not being able to keep them out, the nature of their realm prevented Chaos from finding them, or at least finding their most important strongholds. And it remained like this for some time. Sigmar, with the god Grungni, who had fled into the realm of heaven, decided that there had to create a new kind of warrior. But normal humans or dwarves or elves weren't enough. To put it simply, humans, elves and dwarves were still susceptible to the corrupting powers of chaos, both in mind and body, which meant over time, no matter how pure or strong, unless you're a lizard man of course, but then you're just a mindless automaton with big claws, teeth and clubs. No, Sigmar needed something new, something more specialised, able to withstand these kinds of horrors and also deal back the damage to it. But where to start? And I get the feeling that Sigmar first started looking at what a Chaos Warrior is. Chaos Warriors were practically immortal. They could be killed and come back if Chaos Gods decided to let them, and they only got more powerful as time went on. With that, and with the help of the god Grugni, he created the Soul Forge, a device which combined the power of the two gods, enabled them to essentially form souls and bodies into whatever shape they wanted, and rescuing or taking the strongest warriors who were near death or who fought chaos, both men and women, it didn't matter to Sigmar. He placed them in this soul forge, and using his own power, the power of the heavens or lightning, he created the Stormcast Eternals, warriors who were infused by the power of heaven and by the power of Sigmar. They were tougher, stronger, faster. This might sound a little bit like Space Marines, but it's not entirely the same. To summarise it briefly, Stormcast Eternals are a mix of the magic from Grugni, using the metal that was called Sigmarite from the planet of the Warhammer Fantasy world. He used it to create their armour and weapons. Sigmar, in order to make sure that Stormcast could come back, much like a Chaos Warrior, he managed to create a method of stealing souls from Nagash. It's not yet been explained how he's achieved this. There are suggestions that he may have somehow tricked the secret out of Nagash, or he may have uncovered a means of doing it secretly, because Nagash did not know about this for some time. What this meant was, every single time a Stormcast Eternal dies, he doesn't really die. He gets transformed into lightning, which goes back to the realm of heaven and into the Soul Forge, where he is recast, as it were. This process isn't perfect. Over time, the Stormcast Eternal will start to lose some of his mind, and he will no longer be quite the same person he or she ever was. And the more often they die, each time they come back, they are more possessed by the power of the heavens. They become more like, I guess you could call them like lightning elementals. Their skin changes colour, lightning kind of dances off their skin, their eyes start to glow with lightning. They become less human and become more primal, more elemental. But essentially, he spent the next 1,000 years or so recruiting these new Stormcast Eternals and training them into an effective fighting force. Organised into separate chambers, each with their own specialisations, and recruited from various parts of the mortal realms, essentially giving each one a unique kind of fighting style that would allow them to be more flexible. Although it has to be said, the Stormcast Eternals are characterised by ridiculously heavy armour, warhammers, and also the ability to use lightning as a magical weapon. Oh yeah, and some of them ride, I guess you could call them mini-dragons, called Dracoths, all in some way spawns or assumed to be relations of Dracothian, as Dracothian had pledged his allegiance to Sigmar, as he was not particularly fond of chaos either. When he felt he was ready and the time was right, he launched them into the realm of fire, where the first great battle took place, and took chaos completely by surprise. They hadn't encountered anything like this before and had no idea that Sigmar was doing anything like this. With the Stormcast's return, it was almost a signal to all the other races to start fighting back. The Fire Slayers, who had been very active even during the Chaos incursions, more than ever came forth out of their holds to seek revenge. The Cardon Overlords, their more technologically minded cousins, equally were pushing back against Chaos. The Undead, with Nagash now recovered from his battle with Archaon, Alariel achieving a new warlike form and being encouraged to take part in the war, she decided to clean house, and pushing back Nurgle in the realm of life. The Witch Elves from the realm of shadows, led by Morathi, went forth to do battle against the forces of Chaos, particularly Slaanesh, who they had a vendetta against. Chaos was being pushed back from almost every single place in the mortal realms. And during a conflict, they actually managed to find Gal Maraz hidden inside of Chaos Fortress, which was returned to the god King Sigmar, and he presented it to the general of his armies, the Celestant Prime. And though Chaos did have some victories here and there, the combined effort of all the gods and their races were putting Chaos on the back foot. So Nagash was starting to think, maybe now is the time to screw over everyone again. Because it worked so well for him the first time, Nagash? But to be fair, he is a patient fellow, and he has all the time in the world. Literally, he is one of the only immortal gods that exist. The others can be killed in one way or another, but Nagash is the literal god of death. He can't be killed. He can be put down, and he will have to spend his time regenerating for, well, in this case it took him a couple 1,000 years, but eventually he'll come back. And Nagash had a plan, except this time he was going to do it in a very different way. Using a special black pyramid that had been under construction for a considerable amount of time, taking the raw stuff of magic and putting it into the centre of his realm, he used it to empower himself and create a new army, the Nighthaunt. Ghosts and ethereal beings all seeking vengeance or were punished by Nagash and turned into these ghastly, horrific creatures that, due to their ghost-like nature, could only be harmed by magical weapons or weapons blessed by the gods, came forth out of the graveyards and haunted places of all the realms and began attacking everyone. However, thanks to our lovable friends the Skaven, this ritual didn't quite go off to plan, which is why Nagash couldn't really control them to begin with. Of course, the Skaven didn't really know what Nagash was trying to do, they just liked screwing with people, particularly Nagash, who they've screwed over once before in the old world. Well, twice before, in fact, in the old world. And so Nagash needed to create a Nighthaunt general in order to get them under control, this being Lady Olenna, the Mortarch of Grief, who we will go over it more specifically in her own video, as I will with all the other characters. The Nighthaunt were eventually not stopped, but they were certainly, the brakes on them were put by the combined efforts of the various other factions, in a conflict that's been called the Soul Wars. But this also gave Chaos the opportunity to push back on everyone as well. So what was, at one point, a very much united front, started getting more confused, and it was harder for them to fight Chaos effectively. And to really cap this off, Nagash decided to also create the Ozark, the Ozark, the Ozark. God damn it, I can't pronounce this properly. Damn you, Games Workshop. Ozark Bone Reapers. This new army were skeletal beings, but comprising of multiple souls. Almost Nagash's attempt to create his own kind of Stormcast Eternal, for he was thoroughly livid that the souls of the dead were not coming to him. The elves and Stormcast Eternals were using various methods to prevent souls going to the realm of death, and as far as Nagash was concerned, all souls belonged to him. And he's very, very, very protective of these souls. As far as he is concerned, they are his and his alone. So he was very unhappy with witch elves being created, or the Sylvaneth having their souls essentially reincarnated instead of dying, the Lumineth Light Elves and their distant cousins, the Ideneth Deepkin, stealing, in Nagash's eyes, the souls of the dead that should have gone to him. The various more destructive races, such as the Orcs, Ogres and Goblins, also are appearing in large numbers, wanting to strike back at anything they decided was either worth the fight, had shiny stuff to steal, or were just in the way. And that's where we currently are in Age of Sigmar. There are a few other factions I have not mentioned in much detail, such as the Flesh-Eater Courts, cannibalistic ghouls led by a vampire, who basically have a group hallucination that they are noble chivalric knights. It feels a bit like a dig at Bretonia if you ask me, but I will do my best to ignore it. The followers of Slaanesh, who are currently trying to find out where Slaanesh is hidden, and Slaanesh has started to break some of its chains. The elves might be getting screwed over again soon. The human empires have done their best to try and hold on. The dwarves, that aren't the Fyreslayers or Caradon Overlords, have done their best also to hold on, along with the humans. But in terms of the grand overall story, their parts so far have been relatively small. Whew, well, that's another longish one for me. I'm starting to make these a bit longer as I'm getting better at this whole editing and voice recording thing. Well, hopefully I'm getting better. Leave a comment down below and tell me. Be nice. As nice as possible. Constructive criticism, you know. I hope you've all enjoyed this video, and I will see you all soon. If you want to hear anything specific about Age of Sigmar, or if you want a particular faction to be explored first, please let me know in the comment below. Take care, everyone.